Hi, everyone. I'm Elaine Quijano. It's good to be with you. Thanks for joining us. After months of holding out for a $2 trillion coronavirus stimulus bill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is backing a smaller plan. It's an effort to move things along before key programs expire this month. Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer are now urging Republicans to use a newly introduced bipartisan proposal as a framework for negotiations. The $900 billion relief plan is less than half of what Pelosi had wanted. It includes small business relief, additional unemployment insurance, and funding for state, local, and tribal governments. What it does not include, another round of stimulus checks that many received in the spring. So far, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has shown no willingness to move away from his smaller proposal. It would phase out pandemic unemployment programs in January. His plans have been repeatedly rejected by the Senate. Lawmakers have just weeks to pass something before key programs expire. An estimated 12 million people are scheduled to lose unemployment aid the day after Christmas. Eviction protections and a student loan payment freeze expire December 31st. Today, President-elect Joe Biden held a virtual roundtable with workers and small business owners impacted by the economic crisis. An out-of-work stadium concessions worker from Michigan said she was worried her job won't be available to her when the pandemic is over.
We are really suffering, and it just hurts us when we hear people that don't have any issues, politicians that are doing just fine, when they say, oh, they don't need that extra money. They're just lazy. They need to get a job. There is nowhere to go to get a job. But we would be working. We don't want to be sitting here home on unemployment. We want to be working. We want to be able to go back to our old jobs that we had.
Ed O'Keefe and Anita Kumar join me now. Ed is a CBS News political correspondent following President-elect Biden in Delaware, and Anita is a White House correspondent and associate editor for Politico. Welcome. It is great to see you both. So, Ed, we have talked about this issue for months. Why is Speaker Pelosi adjusting her priorities now? And was this move expected?
It was not expected at all. In fact, it surprised many of the aides to some of these senators who helped put the deal together, even as they're still trying to write the actual legislation itself. Part of the reason it appears she has given in and is now seeking this compromise is because she understands that time is running short. And there are talks, or there's the possibility that some kind of relief package gets tacked on to one of those other must-pass bills that has to get cleared by the end of the year. And she doesn't want to run the risk of telling her members to vote against it when it's on a bill that, either keeps the lights on for the government or might be the big Pentagon defense policy bill. So in essence, it's let's try to put something together now. It may be modest, it may not be enough, but it will demonstrate that we've been hearing the clamorings for some kind of an agreement, and we don't want people going into the holidays knowing that Congress did nothing to help them. Remember, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has a much more modest proposal, less than this $900 billion or so. And there was some indication this afternoon from one of his lieutenants, John Thune, that potentially now there could be a conversation between this bipartisan proposal and what McConnell has proposed, which means the number could get even lower than $900 billion. But there's also concerns about things like whether companies would be liable if workers were to get injured or get COVID because of the pandemic and this time that we're in, the liability shield they call it, whether that would be included or excluded from some kind of deal. And then, of course, there's the issue of the price tag and whether states and cities would get relief or whether it would just be focused on workers. So a lot of dirty details to still get sorted out. As you and I have talked about before, Elaine, it's the end of the year, so it's time to get messy in Congress as they try to put together some big things with very few days left to go.
All right, so Anita, Ed just spelled out some moving parts, but as we understood it, Senate Majority Leader McConnell had maintained that his $500 to $600 billion proposal was the best option, he said, to get President Trump's signature, even though the president previously expressed support for much larger packages of up to $1.8 trillion. But it was interesting because Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin appeared to back McConnell up on that point this morning. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
The president will sign the McConnell proposal that he put forward yesterday. and we look forward to making progress on that.
Payments to Americans out of the question now that was not included in McConnell's proposal yesterday for COVID relief?
I would say at the moment they are, but again, that's something that can be considered down the road.
I mean, Anita, the bottom line is, do we have any more clarity on what President Trump would accept?
It's a great question because he has been all over the place in these months. And remember, things are very different for him than they were before the election. He was very eager before the election to come out with a proposal, even a bigger proposal, because he wanted to say to voters that he got this done. As you've seen in the last couple of weeks, the president has been really removed from a lot of these day-to-day policy decisions. I'm talking to people over at the White House, and the president is, more concerned about about the election and what his future plans are going to be. So I do think that the Treasury Secretary is speaking for the president. He is doing the negotiating. He and the Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, it's a little bit unclear what number that they will go with, but there is a push from some Trump allies to say, let's get this done, both because, it's a critical time because some of these programs are ending, but also that this is something that the president should want to do before the end of his term, for his legacy. He can finish some of these things that he has started, that he was working on, and there are people encouraging him to get in there and try to get this done.
In fact, there are less than 50 days, Anita, until inauguration. There's this speculation that's been growing around potential pardons from President Trump on his way out of the White House. The New York Times is reporting that the president has discussed preemptive pardons for his 3 oldest children, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka, as well as her husband, Jared Kushner, and attorney Rudy Giuliani. So, Anita, what do we know about all of this?
Yes, I have confirmed some of that reporting today that the president is talking about it, but I will say that it's more that people are talking to him about it, that this is a possibility of looking at this group of individuals, both the Rudy Giuliani, the children, and some other people sort of in Trump's orbit, 10 or 20 of those people. The president really hasn't made a decision about that. It's something that he's still considering. Obviously, you've seen that he recently pardoned someone, Michael Flynn, just last week. So, he is looking at pardoning others between now and January 20th, which is Inauguration Day. And he is considering some of these possibilities. Which way he'll go is still a little bit unclear. Now, let's remember, some of these people, including his children, we don't know about any investigations that they might be involved in. We do know about state investigations, and these federal pardons wouldn't deal with that. So the question is, does the president want to get out in front of things and say, look, we'll excuse them for anything that might come up later? And it's something that the president is not sure that he wants to do. That's going to be a stain on his legacy, having all those pardons at the very last minute that really encompass everything. And so that's something that he's looking at and considering.
Well, Ed, as the transition process continues, you spoke to the heads of the NAACP and the National Urban League about the push for diversity in the Biden administration in top roles, not just lower-ranking ones. Let's go ahead and play a clip.
So what is it that you guys are pushing the Biden-Harris team to do?
So the ultimate, I would call it short-term objective, is that there be a cabinet that is diverse. We have specific emphasis on African-American senior staff and what we call statutory cabinet level officers, with also an interest in what might be called the very important secondary level positions, assistant secretaries, undersecretaries, deputy directors.
But this is not about individual appointments. This is about a value proposition to ensure that civil rights considerations are in front of mind. It's a priority, whether it's the Department of Defense, the Department of Agriculture, Homeland Security. All of those agencies impact the quality of life for African Americans and Latinos and many other communities.
It's really interesting to hear those comments, Ed, because this year, as you well know, we have been having these discussions about systemic inequalities. So when you look at the nominations remaining to be announced, Ed, who could be in the running? Well,
and the two really big ones that are left that I think are of utmost concern or intrigue to these groups are Defense Secretary and Attorney General. And there are African-American men under consideration for both roles. Over at the Pentagon, Army 4-star General Lloyd Austin, who once commanded troops in Iraq and once served as head of Central Command, is under consideration, and so is Jay Johnson, the former Homeland Security Secretary, who could also potentially fill other roles, including Attorney General, where the former Massachusetts Senator and presidential candidate Deval Patrick is said to be under consideration, along with Javier Becerra, the California Attorney General, and others. The Biden transition team says that they're working on arranging time for meetings with these civil rights organizations, but once you have it with one group, you got to have them with all sorts of different communities, as they should. And so we're going to keep an eye out for when exactly those meetings might occur if we hear about them. And as both gentlemen told us, it's not just about the cabinet, it's about the deputy positions, it's about the assistant secretary positions, it's about senior positions in the West Wing, and if it's a white cabinet secretary or director of an agency or whatnot, making sure that the staff around them is diverse as well and reflects the differences across this country and the different experiences that people have at each of these agencies. In the case of Mark Morial, head of the National Urban League, he said, yeah, Defense Secretary and Attorney General would be nice, but don't forget the Transportation Secretary, the Agriculture Secretary, the Housing Secretary, whoever runs a lot of those other agencies have a profound effect on the nation in different ways, and those positions as well should be up for consideration. So we've talked about this. This is a reminder that diversity is a very big concern to groups who, put up the votes to get Mr. Biden and Vice President-elect Harris elected, and also know that after 4 years of the Trump administration and what they point out is the least diverse cabinet in at least the past 50 years, that they're expecting things to be far different going forward.
Ed, we also know that Alabama Congressman Mo Brooks is reportedly planning to challenge the Electoral College vote when Congress certifies the result on January 6th. Has that been attempted before? And what could actually happen there?
Sure has. Back in January 2001, there were members of the Congressional Black Caucus who stood up to try to stop the certification of the Electoral College results after the Florida recount. And while Al Gore, who had lost that election, was presiding over the joint session or the special session of the House to receive the Electoral College results, he had to bang away Democrats who were trying to get his attention to try to spark a debate over whether or not the results should be accepted. The rule is that you can have a member of the House make objections, but you have to have a member of the Senate join you in making those objections. Back in 2001, it didn't happen, which is why what played out in the well of the House was basically just noise and drama. But this time we haven't heard yet whether there is a Republican senator willing to join with Mo Brooks and potentially any other House Republican to set up something similar this time. And again, the dynamic will include having Vice President Pence, in his role as Vice President, who has to oversee this special proceeding, potentially gavel away those objections because they don't necessarily turn up a senator who's willing to work with them. If they do find a senator who's willing to support them, and we'll see about that, there then has to be formal deliberations in both chambers about what to do. But let's not get there yet, because so far, at least, we haven't heard about a senator, and that's reaching far into the crevices of the Constitution and congressional procedure.
Ed O'Keefe and Anita Kumar, thank you.